Beast from the East, and you're watching Lights Out.
This is Lights Out. I'm Faisal Khan, and I'm joined by the voice of BT Sport Boxing, Mr. John Rawling. We're here for the press conference between McCrory and Bowen, Saturday night show at the Morningside Arena in Leicester. John, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Excellent. Well, it started off with a hellraiser of a press conference in Leeds. Kid Galahad and Josh Warrington. Talk to me, what was that experience like? You've attended a few press conferences in your time.
It was lively, wasn't it? It was lively. Both of them had things to say. Their trainers had a lot to say, and it certainly got the profile of the fight raised, doesn't it? I mean, people perhaps didn't know too much about it before. They know a hell of a lot more now, which is what it's all about. And the two guys have had their chance to speak directly to each other. Fans can make their own mind up about the atmosphere between the two of them. Some people feel that Josh is underestimating Kid Galahad, and it's his mandatory defence. It's one he's got to take, and it's going to be an interesting one. And I think there'll be a few more feisty press conferences between now and the day of the fight.
You mentioned, some people may think that Josh Warrington is underestimating Kid Galahad, and as he said in his press conference, he's gone from Lee Selby to Carl Frampton, and now from Barry to Sheffield, as he said.
Barry from Sheffield, yeah.
Do you think it's sort of like maybe a danger for Josh Warrington going into his fight, knowing the fact that he couldn't get the fight with the likes of Oscar Valdez and Leo Santa Cruz?
In theory, it could be, but I don't believe it will be. Because I think that Josh is a tremendously professional fighter, and he lives the life. He never gets himself out of shape, and having battled so hard to come through those fights you referred to against Lee Selby and against Carl Frampton, I don't see him losing that momentum now. I think he'll go into it prepared. I think he'll go into it ready. I think he will be focused on Kid Galahad. And the question is now, what Barry can bring to it, how well his game plan's going to be put together, and whether or not he has the skill set to give Josh Warrington real problems. We'll see. He's awkward, he's slippery, Kid Galahad. Different sort of test to Carl Frampton, certainly. But Frampton said after that fight, you might remember, that I was shocked at just how strong and how relentless Josh Warrington is, and I think that Barry's going to find that out at first hand. He's beaten him twice as an amateur. I know it was a long time ago. Josh Warrington's beaten him in the unpaid ranks. Whether or not he can carry it on now, well, we wait to see. But I look forward to another great Leeds event. It's a special sort of atmosphere up there, and at the moment I think he's done probably enough to have his hand raised right now as Britain's #1 boxer.
When you look at Josh Warrington's last two performances, you look at the engine and, like you said, the relentlessness that he brings, into his fights. How does Kid Galahad control that, that fast power and that strong punching power that Josh Warrington has got, rightfully so, as Carl Frampton said that he brings?
It's got to be movement, hasn't it, and keeping him at range and launching sharp counter attacks. I'm sure Dominic Ingle will have looked at him long and hard, and they'll have their game plan. They'll believe that they can do it, but it's one thing to do it in theory. It's another thing to do it in practice. And right at this moment, Josh Warrington, in my opinion, at the age of 28, is absolutely at the peak of his powers. Certain fighters, they get to a stage in their career. Look back to 2005 when Ricky Hatton fought Costa Tszyu. He was never better than then. 2005 was Ricky Hatton's time. He went on after that and had bigger fights, but he never quite got to that level again. And I think that Josh Warrington at the moment is absolutely at the peak of his career. So it'll take one hell of a performance to beat him, particularly when he has that ambition to get to the other side of the Atlantic and to take on Oscar Valdez, to maybe get Leo Santa Cruz, and to get big fights in the States. It's an ambition he wants, and I think it's going to take a hell of a performance from Barry to deny him getting there.
The WBO have ordered Sergey Kovalev to defend his title against Britain's #1 in Anthony Yarde. First of all, do you think the time is right for Anthony Yarde to step up and challenge for a world title? And secondly, what did you make of Tunde Ajayi's comments on saying that Anthony Yarde would be the A side going into this fight?
Well, I think first off, I think the fight will happen. I mean, a lot of people have been very sceptical about it and saying, "Oh, it's just, Tunde and people manoeuvring Anthony Yarde to raise his profile." I don't accept that. I think they've looked at Sergey Kovalev and seen his knockout defeat against Alvarez. They've seen the defeats against Andre Ward, and they think that he's not the fighter that he was a year or two ago. He's 36 years old now. He doesn't, I don't think, always live the best life away from boxing. He's been a great fighter. Take nothing away from him, but boxing's about timing. Anthony, 27 going on 28, he's bowled everybody over so far. He's not fought anybody from the higher echelons of the sport, and that's a justifiable complaint. But he's moved through, and he's moving through quickly, and he's got tremendous punching power. And yeah, Kovalev can do this, Kovalev can do that, but can Kovalev cope with the power that Anthony Yarde's going to take there? And I think the timing for this fight is absolutely right, and I think people who write Anthony Yarde off, I think they do so at their peril.
John, do you not think it makes more sense for Anthony Yarde to maybe, of course we all know that he's, I believe, well, he is the mandatory for Sergey Kovalev, but do you not think it makes more sense to perhaps, give what British boxing fans want, which is a fight with the likes of Jose Burton and even Joshua Buatsi, before taking the challenge of Sergey Kovalev? Well,
Joshua Buatsi is a matchroom fighter. He's on the other side of the promotional equation. So that is not an easy fight to make. It's a fight which could well happen somewhere down the line, possibly when one or both make it to World Championship level. And I'd love to see it from a British boxing perspective. It's a fight you'd like to see. But why, in all honesty, would either fighter take that contest now, when they've got a huge amount to lose and there's bigger prizes up there to be taken? I think the fight can well happen somewhere in the future, but I think it's absolutely right and makes sound commercial sense and promotional sense right now to get Anthony Yarde in against Sergey Kovalev, and I think the fight will happen. And what Tunde was saying about him being the A side of the promotion, I think I think people have actually slightly misinterpreted what Tunde's saying there. He's saying that he wouldn't like to see Anthony Yarde go over to the States. Well, that's a justifiable worry with some of the judging decisions that we see going on over there. Boxing's a business, and if it makes the most money for the fights to come to the UK, and Kovalev hasn't got a huge fan base in the States, then the fight will come over here. And I think that it will be done, and I think that it will happen here in the UK. That doesn't necessarily mean to say that Yarde's the A side. Kovalev is the champion, and that's the way it works. But from a financial, economic point of view, coming over to the UK probably makes a huge amount of sense.
Just want to get your thoughts on Tyson Fury signing with ESPN, and of course now we all know that the rematch with Deontay Wilder isn't happening. He's going to fight Dominic Breazeale, and we're still waiting for an opponent to be named for Tyson Fury. What's your thoughts on the deal, and do you think it affects big fights happening in the near future?
Well, potentially, but again, I go back to what I said before. Boxing is a business, and the fights involving Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder are too big not to happen. They will happen. It's just a question of when, and the politics are going to be difficult because there's different promotional groups, there's different television companies, but if a fight is big enough, then those contests can happen, and I believe they will happen, but it's going to be interesting to see how they get there. Mike Tyson and Lennox Lewis were similar going back 15 years. One was a Showtime fighter, one was an HBO fighter, different promotional groups, but ultimately the fight happened because the fight was so big.
What's your thoughts on Deontay Wilder defending his WBC title against Dominic Breazeale?
Well, my thoughts are that Deontay Wilder will win the fight. He's a huge puncher. I'd have liked to have seen him get in there against Tyson Fury for the immediate rematch, but I think that is a fight which isn't going to go away. That will happen somewhere down the line, and I hope that Anthony Joshua gets into the mix, gets the win that his promoters hope at the beginning of June, and that he moves on as well and strengthens his negotiating position, if you like, with the United States market. So I think it's inevitable that when those big fights happen, they will happen in America. When, we'll see. I don't think it. Well, possibly the back end of this year. I think more likely it's going to be next year.
Another fighter that is currently speaking to ESPN on signing a deal is, of course, Dillian Whyte, and there's been rumours that Dillian Whyte will sign with ESPN. Would it make sense if Dillian Whyte was to sign with ESPN for him to fight Tyson Fury?
It'd make a huge amount of sense. If the money's right, Dillian could have had the Anthony Joshua fight, but he turned it down because he thought he was being taken for a fool with what he was being offered. If the deal is right, then yeah, the fight can happen, and I think Dillian is the sort of guy who's going to really fancy that. He won't back down from it, and likewise Tyson. If that fight is there to be made, then I think it's an appealing fight, and I, for one, would like to see it.
A man that just walked past us was Nathan Gorman, big Nathan Gorman. He takes on Kevin Johnson on Saturday night, and then Daniel Dubois is scheduled to fight out in the SSE Arena in Wembley. Surely, if they both win the next two fights, that's a fight that will be made.
I think near
the year.
Well, Frank Warren's told me it definitely will be made. It's a question of raising the two fellas' profile.
Perhaps for the British title.
I think that's a likely fight. When it will be, perhaps back end of the year. Maybe if you're talking about an Anthony Yarde Kovalev fight, maybe on the same promotion as that.
It would be a great card.
It's a possibility. I think that's a fight which is building. People are starting to talk about it. The reaction to Daniel Dubois' win against Cotonou at the Royal Albert Hall a week or two ago indicated to me that the British fight fans are starting to realise that certainly that Daniel is special, and I think that Nathan's going to be wanting to go out there and try and beat Kevin Johnson more impressively than Daniel did. Johnson took Daniel Dubois the distance, and he took a lot of punches, but he never remotely looked as though he was going to get stopped. Can Nathan do better? Interesting to see.
Final question, John, before we go in there for the press conference. What did you make of Errol Spence's performance against Mikey Garcia last weekend?
Brilliant. But I was surprised in the build-up to that people were giving Garcia giving Garcia a shout. I always thought that what happened was going to happen. It was the old adage of a good big un beats a good little un, and he's so much bigger a man and a southpaw. It was just using his reach, using his awkward stance, and I think Garcia, after the first 4 or 5 rounds, was pretty much accepting the inevitable, and they were just looking at he was just looking at getting out of there on his shield and going the distance. Spence is a special fighter, and if Crawford comes through beating Amir Khan, then Crawford against Spence is the fight. You know, forget Manny Pacquiao. I wouldn't really like to see that fight. I don't want to see a fighter like Manny Pacquiao beaten into next year by Spence, which I think is what would happen. Spence against Crawford, though, provided Crawford can come through against Amir Khan, Spence Crawford is a big one.
Okay, John, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it, and we look forward to catching up with you soon.
Okay,
John Rawling, thank you for talking to Lights Out.
Thank you.